John Wayne is a Hollywood legend who's known for his iconic big screen performances.
Well, take a look at this huge estate in Encino, south of Ventura Boulevard along Luis Avenue. This is the old estate of John Wayne, and at about 5.5 acres, it is one of the largest remaining residential plots anywhere.
Should offensive views expressed by a long-dead movie actor in an interview he gave nearly 50 years ago cause his name to be removed from an airport? That question has been raised about the John Wayne Memorial Airport in Santa Ana, Orange County, California, near...
My right name is Marion Michael Morrison, and the studio decided that it was not American enough for a boy who was going to play Breckenridge.
For 32 years, John Wayne's Newport Beach mansion sat locked like a time capsule. Every pistol-scarred saddle, every love letter, every revised script sealed behind heavy oak doors. When the vault finally cracked open in 2011, curators expected dusty memorabilia. Instead, they found a fortune reduced to scraps, a will that sliced his own family into bitter factions, and whispered evidence of secret romances, off-camera injuries, and a political scandal explosive enough to threaten the airport and university that still bear his name. How did Hollywood's toughest cowboy die with pockets nearly empty, yet leave relics worth millions? Which treasure vanished before the auditors arrived? And what buried confession could force America to rethink its most iconic gunslinger? Keep watching, because the legend of the Duke is about to be stripped to the bone. Marion Robert Morrison didn't just arrive. He thundered in. The newborn tipped the scales at 13 pounds on May 26, 1907. So colossal that the Winterset, Iowa newspaper ran a front-page blurb before anyone knew the kid would one day redefine American grit. Legend claims the doctor joked he'd already broken his first Bronco. 3 years later, the toddler toppled through ice into a frigid creek and stopped breathing. A passerby hauled him out, pounded his tiny back, and jump-started a heart that seemed determined to beat through anything. Family whispers say that brush with death turned him fearless. Too stubborn to drown, his mother would laugh. Hard times hit soon after. In 1914, his father's pharmacy collapsed, dragging the Morrisons to sun-baked Glendale, California, where creditors couldn't keep chasing. Marion hated the move until he found one friend that never judged, an Airedale Terrier named Duke who shadowed him to the firehouse each dawn. Firefighters dubbed the pair Big Duke and Little Duke. The boy liked that more than the name Marion, so Duke clung to him for life. Proof that identity can be seized, not assigned. At Glendale High, he sprouted into a lanky 6-footer, obsessed with football, convinced the gridiron was his ticket out of poverty. By 17, he'd muscled into first-string tackle and dreamed of law school on a full scholarship. Yet classmates noticed something else. Whenever the projector flickered in town, Duke stared harder at the swirling silhouettes than any playbook. He didn't know it yet, but destiny was about to blitzsack his plans, tear up the script, and shove him straight toward the silver screen. Because one freak wave in the Pacific would soon snap his shoulder, obliterating the scholarship, ending the law dream, and opening a studio back door that Hollywood's future cowboy king would kick off its hinges. The Pacific didn't just shatter Duke's collarbone. It detonated his future. One misjudged body surf at Newport in 1925 ripped ligaments, erased his USC scholarship, and dumped the once unstoppable tackle back in Glendale with a sling and a crushing sense of failure. Coaches stopped calling. Tuition bills kept arriving. Desperate, he limped to Fox Studios and took the only gig offered, hauling props and hammering sets for $35 a week. Less than a day's tuition. Between nail strikes, he memorized everything. How cameras prowled, how dialogue cracked like a whip, how extras hit their marks. Director John Ford spotted the 6'4" kid balancing Roman shields on one shoulder and asked his name. "Marion Morrison," he mumbled. Ford winced. "That'll never fill a marquee." They scribbled options on scrap paper. Anthony Wayne, Duke Morrison, until one stuck, short and ironclad. John Wayne. The ink was barely dry when bit parts rolled in. He tackled background roles, uncredited cavalrymen, anonymous linemen, filmed 5-day quickies in sweltering desert dust, and wrapped entire westerns in 48 hours. Paychecks vanished to rent. Dinner was usually a can of beans scorched on a hot plate. Friends joked he smelled like gunpowder and pinto. By 1938, After 80 bargain bin odors and not a single headline, Wayne sat outside stage 7 ready to quit. Maybe I'm just too tall for this town. He sighed, staring at the gate he'd once dreamed of storming. What he didn't hear was the hush inside a nearby office where John Ford clutched a new script titled Stagecoach and told studio brass he'd walk before he cast anyone but the lanky prop kid no one believed in. In a few months, one 8-second close-up would flip the entire Hollywood pecking order, and the man who almost limped away would ride straight into immortality. The gamble that turned Marion into myth began in a cramped casting office, where studio moguls insisted the lead of Stagecoach must be bankable. Gary Cooper, not the bean-eating nobody who'd spent a decade falling off bargain basement horses. John Ford slammed his fist and snarled, "No, Wayne, no picture," then marched out, betting his own reputation that the 6'4" prop boy could carry the first prestige western of the sound era. When cameras finally rolled in Monument Valley's blazing dust, Wayne's nerves rattled so hard the rifle shook in his hands. Ford forced him through 27 takes of the same 8-second entrance. Camera whip pans, zoom locks on his flinty stare, sun flashing off that lever-action iron until the kid's jaw quit trembling and legend snapped into focus. The resulting close-up thundered through theaters like a cavalry bugle. Audiences gasped. Critics scrambled for superlatives, and exhibitors rewound the reel just to watch that arrival again. Stagecoach scored 7 Oscar nods, revived the moribund Western, and blitzed Wayne from poverty to poster board icon. Yet he earned only $3,700, a tenth of Cooper's usual fee. Reporters asked what it felt like to become the face of frontier courage overnight. Wayne just muttered that rent was still due Monday. But long after the statuettes were handed out, the indelible image of the Ringo Kid, wind-whipped hair, rawhide coat flaring, rifle cocked with casual menace, burned itself into America's collective memory. Hollywood skeptics suddenly tripped over themselves to offer scripts, while Ford kept Wayne humble with public taunts and impossible retakes. The kid who nearly quit was now saddled with a bigger question. Could he shoulder the myth he'd just created? Because behind every silver screen hero lies the grind of proving it again. And the next test would demand more than a perfect close-up. If you love seeing those behind-the-scenes turning points, hit like so I know to keep unearthing more cinematic game changers. John Ford never cared how famous his protege had become. On his sets, John Wayne was still the gawky prop boy who needed breaking in. For nearly 5 decades, the two churned out 14 pictures, and everyone felt like a steel-toed boot camp. Ford belittled Wayne in front of crew, ordered endless retakes for simple gestures, and on the searchers made him pick up a Winchester, lift it, set it down. 17 agonizing times, just to prove who ran the prairie. Wayne swallowed every insult because he believed Ford's cruelty forged better performances, and audiences agreed. Ethan Edwards' cold stare still chills spines today. Yet the pain wasn't always emotional. On sands of Iwo Jima in 1949, director Alan Dwan insisted on live ordnance. Real flamethrowers hissed within feet of the actors. Wayne took a blast of concussion that flung him against sandbags and left him dazed for hours. Another charge misfired, showering shrapnel that nicked his cheek and singed his uniform. When he came to, he laughed it off, reset his helmet, and demanded the cameras keep rolling. The realism stunned moviegoers and earned him his first Oscar nomination, only for the statue to go home with Broderick Crawford. Wayne shrugged publicly, but friends say he drove the back roads of Laurel Canyon that night, pounding the steering wheel and swearing he'd never be and also ran again. The mix of Ford's public hazing and the Academy's cold shoulder carved a chip that never left his broad shoulders. It fueled a work ethic that bordered on punishment. Dawn to dusk shoots, stunt work younger men refused, and a stubborn refusal to let any director, not even Ford, say the last word. Still, Wayne sensed that surviving someone else's gauntlet wasn't enough. To silence every critic, he'd have to raise his own stakes, mortgage his own comfort, and gamble on a dream so huge its failure could bankrupt him. That next roll of the dice would be called the Alamo, and it would demand far more than grit. Dream projects are supposed to crown a career. The Alamo nearly guillotined John Wayne's. For 15 years, he'd sworn he'd filmed the Texas Last Stand, exactly as it happened. And when studios balked at the price tag, he signed the loan papers himself. House, cars, boat, even future residuals. $12 million, about $120 million today, vanished into a Bexar County dust bowl where crews baked 1.5 million adobe bricks and raised a full-scale replica fort so authentic historians used it for tours, 7,000 extras, 1,500 horses, 90-plus shooting days under 110-degree Fahrenheit sun. The set looked like an army staging real war. It felt like one, too. A bayonet sent an extra to the infirmary for 26 stitches. A runaway cannon rolled through catering. Wayne, directing, producing, and starring, refused to trim a single musket volley. Premiere night was fireworks and red carpet cavalry. But critics shrugged, and box office returns limped. Wayne had mortgaged his empire for a film the Academy snubbed in Best Director and that bankers called foolhardy theater. He aged a decade in months, and friends say the stress deepened the lines fans mistook for rugged charm. Yet the very stubbornness that bankrupted him would also resurrect him. 9 years later, the script for True Grit landed on his nightstand while he was recuperating from lung cancer surgery. Too old, too weak, eye-patched, he nearly passed. Then he glimpsed Rooster Cogburn's bruised humor and realized the role mirrored his own scars. He bulked up, strapped on the patch, and wheezed through Colorado's altitude with an oxygen tank hidden behind boulders between takes. The audiences roared. The box office overflowed. The Academy finally clasped his hand around gold. "If I'd known this," he quipped, "I'd have worn that patch 35 years earlier." Privately, he knew the statue settled debts. The Alamo had stacked sky high. But fame's ledger wasn't finished. Just as Hollywood crowned its battered king, trouble was cocking a pistol back home. Jealous lovers, broken vows, and one midnight gunshot that almost rewrote the Duke's legend for good. Surprised by that gamble? Hit the like button to help grow the channel, and let's dive into the Duke's stormy love life. John Wayne's on-screen swagger hid a private life streaked with melodrama. 3 marriages, enough affairs to fill a dime store pulp, and one night when jealousy nearly turned fatal. He married his college sweetheart, Josephine Saenz, in 1933, and filled their Los Angeles bungalow with 4 children. But Hollywood nights ran long, and in 1938 he met Marlene Dietrich on the set of 7 Sinners. Rumors claimed the German star slipped her phone number into his script. Wayne started sneaking out of the family home, returning at dawn with lipstick on the collar of his denim work shirt. Josephine filed for divorce in 1945, taking half his modest fortune and a chunk of his pride. Barely a year later, Wayne rebounded with Esperanza Barr, a fiery Mexican socialite who could match him shot for shot in tequila. The romance was volcanic, equal parts passion and paranoia. One winter night in 1947, Wayne staggered home from a studio rap party. Esperanza, convinced he'd been with co-star Gail Russell, greeted him at the doorway, clutching a revolver. She fired once. Some say into the ceiling, others claim at his chest but missed. Wayne wrestled the pistol away, the bullet burying itself in a plaster wall that contractors quietly patched before reporters arrived. The marriage limped on through barroom shouting matches and tabloid headlines until 1954, when the courts pried them apart. Enter Peruvian beauty Pilar Palette, Wayne's third and final wife. Together, they bought the Newport Beach mansion, raised 3 more kids, and hosted Sunday cookouts where studio chiefs rubbed shoulders with Marines. Yet stability was an illusion. By 1973, Wayne had moved his secretary, Pat Stacy, into the guest wing, insisting Pilar preferred life on their Arizona ranch. The legal paperwork never caught up. They separated but never divorced. When Wayne's will surfaced in 1979, Pilar's name was nowhere on the ledger. Instead, 7 children inherited the estate, while Pilar received only the Newport furniture she could physically remove. Shockwaves tore through the clan. Daughter Isa later dragged brother Ethan into court, battling over royalties and the licensing empire tied to their father's name. The courtroom drama outlived the man himself, proving that 6-shooters weren't the only things Wayne left loaded. Yet family crossfire would pale next to the enemy stalking him from inside. The chain-smoking cowboy was about to face the Big C, and his greatest performance would unfold far from the soundstage. Under hospital fluorescence, fighting to outdraw cancer itself. Cancer came at Wayne like an outlaw he couldn't outshoot. In early 1964, doctors carved out his left lung and 2 ribs, warning the chain-smoking star the odds of survival were no better than a coin flip. He named the disease the Big C to strip it of its terror, then stunned Hollywood by going public. Filming American Cancer Society spots in the same rasp that once rallied cavalry charges. Reporters predicted career suicide. Instead, ticket sales spiked as fans watched their hero limp back onto set, stitches still raw beneath a flannel shirt. For 5 years he stayed clear, puffing cigars even after surgeons begged him not to tempt fate. Fate didn't listen. In 1978, a gnawing ache in his gut proved to be stomach cancer. Too weak for another big-budget epic, he chose The Shootist, a tale of a gunfighter dying of the same disease. Between takes, he breathed through hidden oxygen tubes, then yanked them free to mount his horse and tumble onto saloon floors, refusing a stunt double because Rooster never ran from a fall. Crew watched him spit blood into the dust, wipe his mustache, and call, "Roll it." The performance felt like a living obituary. Weary eyes, voice sanded down by pain, but dignity unbroken. Premiere night, he buttoned his vest over a drainage tube and cracked that he'd never been more alive. Weeks later, he recorded a final message from a UCLA hospital bed, pleading for research dollars in the same gravelly baritone that once commanded Fort Apache. "Find that cure," he rasped, "and ride hard." On June 11th, 1979, the Duke holstered his courage for the last time. Flags dipped, crowds wept. But another story was already stirring. Inside a sealed Newport mansion where his fortune, his will, and 700 forgotten relics waited to ignite a fresh civil war over the legend he left behind. The mansion on Bayshore Drive looked plain from the street. White stucco, low roofline, nothing screaming movie royalty. Yet behind its weather-stained doors sat 32 years of silence. On a humid June morning in 2011, Wayne's heirs finally turned the key. Air, thick with cedar and salt, rushed out, carrying the smell of saddle, soap, cigar, ash, and something older. Like the ghost of the man himself. Dining table still set for 6 half-finished correspondence piled beneath a brass lamp, a pistol resting on folded scripts as if he'd be back by supper. Archivists cataloged 700 relics. The battered Green Beret cap from the Green Berets, Rooster Cogburn's patched duster, a gold-plated Winchester gifted to a stuntman. Even his last driver's license, photo faded, weight proudly listed at 260, lay in a kitchen drawer beside a crusted tin of Copenhagen. Each item stirred bidding wars. The beret fetched $179,200. A sweat-stained Stetson worn in Big Jake cost $119,000. Fans paid $89,500 for the ordinary plastic card that once got him past traffic cops. In 48 hours, the auction raked in millions, yet headlines asked a darker question. Why had the Duke died with an estate valued at only $6.8 million, barely a quarter of what his movies earned in a single year? Yacht Wild Goose sold months before his death for $750,000 cash no probate ledger could firmly trace. Residual checks vanished into shell corporations. Real estate deeds surfaced in Nevada, Arizona, even Panama. Whispers hinted at quiet generosity secret hospital bills paid. Crew mortgages cleared, but no receipts survived to prove the legend's largesse. The sealed will that sliced Pilar out entirely only deepened the mystery. Lawsuits flew like ricochets. Daughter Isa versus brother Ethan, siblings versus John Wayne Enterprises, each demanding their share of a fortune nobody could accurately count. And while family lawyers sharpened knives, historians crawled room to room, sliding open cedar chests, half expecting one more revelation: a diary, a confession, anything. Instead, they found a neatly folded magazine interview from 1971. Pages yellowed, but the words still loaded. Those words were about to explode, threatening not just an inheritance, but the very airport, university wing, and American myth built on Wayne's towering shadow. In 1971, Playboy handed John Wayne a tape recorder and watched him shoot himself in the foot. The interview that followed buried for decades in back-issue bins captured, the Duke bragging that he believed in white supremacy until blacks are educated to a point of responsibility, dismissing land seizures from native peoples as simple survival, and blasting Midnight Cowboy with a homophobic slur. Editors shrugged in that era. Fans barely blinked. But the words never died. Fast forward to February 2019. A screenwriter tweets a photo of the article, branding Wayne a terrible person. The post detonates, amassing millions of views in hours. Suddenly, the long-sealed mansion wasn't the only thing dragged into daylight. So was the hero's ugliest conviction. Cable panels debated, hashtags trended, and junior high teachers fielded questions from kids asking why the airport down the freeway honors a man who preached racism. By summer 2020, after George Floyd's murder ignited nationwide protests, Orange County Democrats formally petitioned to strip Wayne's name from the terminal he'd christened in 1979. Supporters argued the bronze cowboy statue greeting travelers mocked the county's new multicultural majority. Detractors called the move historical vandalism. TV crews camped under departure boards as protesters held signs reading "Duke Out, Justice In." Wayne's son Ethan fired back on talk radio, insisting his father had evolved and blasting cancel culture run wild. The Board of Supervisors tabled the vote yet again. But the controversy now flares each election cycle like a prairie fire that refuses to burn out. Across town, students at USC's School of Cinematic Arts demanded the removal of a sprawling John Wayne exhibit. Administrators hemmed, hawed. Then in July 2020, quietly wheeled the posters and memorabilia into storage, citing a commitment to anti-racism. Critics cried censorship. Activists called it overdue. Film professors found themselves teaching The Searchers, with disclaimers longer than the lecture. The question echoes louder each year. Can you love the myth and loathe the man? Supporters say Wayne embodied frontier resilience, that art should stand apart from its creator's flaws. Opponents countered that his movies glorify conquest while his own words demean the conquered. Every fan forced to reckon with those yellowed Playboy pages must choose: keep the cowboy on a pedestal or let the marble crack. Yet even as reputations smolder, collectors still pay six figures for his sweat-stained Stetsons. Hollywood still screens true grit beneath restored Technicolor stars. And somewhere in a Newport storage crate, rumor has it, lies one more sealed envelope, Wayne's final unsent letter whose contents could tilt the debate forever. But until someone pries it open, the Duke's legacy remains a high-noon standoff between nostalgia and accountability. John Wayne's story ends where it began, in a locked room filled with unanswered questions. He rode out of Iowa as the baby too big for the crib, fought his way through busted shoulders, bankrupting dreams, cancerous lungs, jealous lovers, and public scorn, and still galloped into history as America's indestructible cowboy. Yet the mansion he left behind, with its auctioned hats, vanished yacht money, and one rumored envelope still hidden in a cedar chest reminds us that legends are patched together from equal parts triumph and trouble. The same man who filmed cancer awareness commercials puffed cigars between takes. The patriot who saluted troops voiced words that decades later scorch modern ears. So what do we do with a hero whose shadow stretches across both Hollywood boulevards and moral fault lines? That choice isn't carved on his tombstone or written in any Willets waiting in us. Because every relic cracked loose from that Newport vault isn't just a souvenir of the Duke. It's a mirror held up to anyone who ever cheered the swagger, ignored the flaws, or wondered how far myth can outrun the man. The door to that past has finally swung open. The real question is, will we step inside or keep riding by? If John Wayne's legacy still has you torn, like the video, share your take in the comments, and subscribe for more untold Hollywood sagas every week.